Hey folks, so today we're going to be talking about something particularly troublesome, and is one of the recurring reasons why I am very frightened of making this channel. Yeah. So I'm going to spell out roughly what happened, and I want to sort of give everyone an idea of what was said, what Twitter did, and why it was stupid. Okay? So, let's talk about what happened with Lindsay Ellis. And let's talk about it in the context of Lindsay Ellis is a content creator, ostensibly part of the group of people usually put under BreadTube. Perhaps I will join their hollowed ranks someday. But the fact is that BreadTubers have a really interesting relationship with their fans, because a lot of their fans or anti-fans seem to have this really strong push to immediately cut them down or immediately be waiting for some opportune time to attack. Now, I know this is going to be a contentious point, but this is exactly what happened with ContraPoints, right? I really like Natalie's work, and I'm biased. I fully admit I'm biased. It was one of the things that let me come out. It was one of the things that let me and my partner have more substantive discussions about my gender, about theirs. I don't want to necessarily say we're ContraPoint stans, but I will say that, like, I genuinely find most critique to be pretty shitty about ContraPoints. There are some things that I think are very, very legitimate. Let me be very clear on that. And I think those people should be heard, but it gets lost in the noise of just hateful vitriol. Twitter has a problem with this, and I think Contra's video canceling talks about this really well, because what it does is it essentially talks about the sort of way information is communicated, and thus sort of generalized and abstracted to sort of bring in the largest amount of bad faith actors as possible. I also want to own my bias here and say that I'm also a fan of Lindsay Ellis. While I'm not as necessarily a big fan of hers as I am, say, like ContraPoints or Luxander, I will say that Lindsay's videos sometimes are just really fun to watch while drinking. Or just silly. Her video on the live-action Beauty and the Beast is still a regular watch in our house. We'll occasionally just sit down and watch it, and I will often use the GIF that it says, "Thanks, I hate it," because I think it's really fucking cute. And she looks great, so, sorry. But here's the thing. I'm open to criticism about the content creators I like. I hear this about Vosh. I hear this about Lindsay Ellis. I hear this about ContraPoints. I hear this about Demon Mama. I hear this about Riley Grace. All the people that I tend to follow, I want to know if some of the things that are being said are true. So the issue is that Lindsay Ellis posted this. Where is it? There we go. Fixed it. So, here's what happened. Lindsay posted on March 26th, 2021, that also watched Raya and the Last Dragon, and I think we need to come up with a name for this genre that is basically Avatar the Last Airbender reduxes. It's like half of all the YE fantasy published in the last few years anyway. So, I'm going to ask chat, just reading that right now, I want your responses. What meaning do you make from that? What about this do you take from that? I'd like to know what you guys think before I give my opinion. Because I think it's important to contextualize what the baseline reading of this is. I don't want to talk about any other tweets. I don't want to talk about it. I genuinely think this idea of solely pulling up different things that content creators have said over the last several decades is not useful. Some of the stuff I've seen brought up against Lindsay has been from literally 5 or 6 years back. I am a leftist. I am also someone, as a therapist, who believes in rehabilitation. It is my belief, and my partner's belief, that people can be rehabilitated and that people can learn. The recent situation with the former Nazi girl on Twitter getting so much shit from leftists is a perfect example of that. people not really living up to their leftist standards, in my opinion. So does anyone have anything they want from this? Like, I want to know what your guys' thoughts are. What do you take from this? And you can put it down in the comments below, too, if you're watching this after the fact. I'm totally okay with somebody sounding off, because I think... Okay, so... Funky Thought says, seems like she's saying the new movie felt derivative in terms of its story and or characters. Right. That's the thing. Funky fucking nailed it. So, if I read this, and I know anything about Lindsay Ellis's content, and I'm acting in good faith, which means I'm reading this with the best possible framing until given further evidence, what makes no fucking sense to me is why anyone would react poorly to this. To me, and I believe Zena said the same thing, what this reads as is a question around story structure. This deals with a way in which there is a sort of YA fantasy trope of doing something very similar to Avatar: The Last Airbender. Let's see. Lizzie, it feels racist and reductionist. Lizzie, I'm going to have to stop you right there. I disagree. I disagree emphatically, actually. The reason I say this is because if I look at this and I go, so these are two stories that seem to be Asian-inspired worlds or stories or ideas, and essentially has very similar kind of tropes. To me, I don't think this is reductionist in any way, shape, or form. I think this is an overall decent thing. Now, I haven't seen Avatar: The Last Airbender in years, and I've never seen Raya, so I don't even know if that's a substantive critique. But my critique of the critique is that it doesn't seem racist in the slightest. You're saying it's an equivocation? Can you say more to that? I don't know what you mean by equivocation of this. Are you saying it's a fallacy of equivocation, or what do you mean? Because from my perspective, there's nothing wrong with this tweet. To me, what this reads as is just someone pointing out similar setups of both the story and how it's structured. I mean, if you want to go down the racist line, what makes Avatar: The Last Airbender okay then? Because isn't it pulling from multiple different Asian cultures, right? Like, isn't the Fire Nation sort of Japanese? Isn't the Earth Nation sort of Chinese? Like, I don't think she is. I actually think you're objectively wrong on this one, because she goes on to actually clarify this. The idea that they're Asian-centric, I don't think they are. I think she's talking about a very specific formula of the way the characters come together and all that. I've seen a couple talks about this on Reddit, and I can try to find those if you'd like, but I don't think that's a really fair interpretation. And I would also arguably say, yeah, so that's fine, it's Southeast Asian, but it doesn't necessarily follow that this is a racist critique. And I guess the question is that considering this person has literally done videos on talking about racist Disney, talking about the ways that race was handled by Disney, the idea that this is racist feels very out of character for this person. Like it actively feels like that's a bad faith criticism. Even if you don't agree with the critique and think these are two different stories, that's fine. But I think that the internet's jump towards this being racist is just incorrect. In fact, I've seen a lot of people, yeah, but neither does fucking Avatar. Avatar is very Asian-centric without necessarily doing justice to all those cultures. Not exactly. Like, I don't see the difference here. And if we want to go into ones that really screw up doing justice to the culture, let's talk about Korra. Because Legend of Korra is garbage. It's got a lot of good ideas, and not many of them executed well, and turns out to be torturing a young girl a lot. Holy shit, does Korra get fucking abused. Like, again, I don't see this, what you're talking about, is uncentered. But it's not. It's really not. If you know what to look for, especially as someone like me with a Zen background, it's just not. Arguably speaking, like, it's not a one-to-one comparison, but like the Fire Nation really does read as sort of vaguely sort of Japanese. The Earth Nation reads as vaguely Chinese. The Water Nations run similar to Inuit, and the Air Nomads seem very much pulled from Tibet or from like Vajrayana Buddhism, that kind of stuff. Like, I guess I just don't see it. They're both centered around Asian culture or pulling Asian tropes. It's really not. Yes, they used real martial arts to do the bending, but I don't think that's true. I don't think it's a martial arts-centric show. I think that's one of the ways they engage in conflict and move the story ahead, but I don't really buy in this argument. So, my take on this is pretty simple. At worst, are you talking about Rhea? Then yeah, absolutely. But if we're talking about Avatar, I absolutely have, and I think you're wrong. About Avatar, they've said it's a homage to lots of things they've liked. I don't know if it's specifically and only about being an homage to martial arts. I think that's objectively incorrect. So, my take on this is that the worst case scenario of what is happening here is that Lindsay Ellis misspoke in a way that you could, if you squinted at it, see this as vaguely kind of racist. But rather than anyone just asking her to clarify or asking her to some degree, attempt to better explain her position, which she did to try to do anyway when the thing started to build up. There are screenshots of that elsewhere. But essentially what happened is I believe that people jumped down her throat, immediately made the assumption that this was coming from a racist place, which I don't think it was, and rather than just explain to her how that was and maybe she could do it, they started yelling, they started retweeting, they started losing their shit, and before you knew it, you had this blowing up on Twitter, and everyone's demanding an apology. Now, my understanding is somewhere in there very quickly that she then just deactivated her Twitter account. I don't know if she deleted it altogether or just deactivated. I know those are two separate things that do something similar as far as looking at it. I would argue, at least to some degree, I think Twitter over-fucking reacted here. Because looking at this person's videography and looking at the work they've done, including talking about literal characters being whitewashed in The Phantom of the Opera, or the way in which Disney basically whitewashes out any of the racist history of Dumbo, but goes out of its way in such a way as to make it almost seem like we're not going to talk about that at all. Like, it's actually kind of fucked. So, this is why I look at this as, if I go by just this tweet and the videos I've seen, I don't understand how to read this as racist. Now, I'm willing to acknowledge that there may be Asian Americans or Asians from various countries who at some level see this as such. And if that's the case, I would actually be really happy to be educated on that. But what I see, and this is what's kind of happening in chat, is I see a lot of white leftists speaking up and immediately jumping that this is racist. In fact, most of these posts genuinely seem to be from people who are not Asian. And essentially are going off on a woman over their misinterpretation of media. Because that's what I genuinely think this is, folks. I think this is literally bad media comprehension. I think this is a really good example of bad media comprehension. Can you move over there, please? Jesus. I'll fix it later. So again, my argument here is this. Was this something, even with the worst interpretation I've given here, was this something worth attacking someone online for, because the last I checked, this tag was shared by over, I want to say, like 14,000 people, like 14,000 tweets at least. Does that seem justifiable to something that is, at the worst case scenario, insensitive, and doesn't necessarily go by this interpretation? I just don't see this as intentionally harmful and racist. At best case scenario, it was a misstep or a misunderstanding. But this is the difference where I see things as problematic. I don't have a problem with people making mistakes and then being educated and working through them. But when you have the entirety of Twitter jump down someone's throat, I really want people to explain this to me. How is that effective? I am a leftist. That means that I believe in rehabilitative justice, not retributive justice. The people that jumped on this and started dunking on her and attacking her over the worst possible interpretations of this tweet, do you think those people really care about rehabilitating, Lindsay? Do you think they really care about her coming to a better understanding about the difficulties of Asian Americans or other Asian people? Fuck no. They want to make her cry. They want to attack her. She's actively talked about this affecting her mental health terribly. But we don't want to talk about that because we just want to get her back, right? That's what it is. People want to lash out because it feels good. And they don't realize that inadvertently, if you times that by thousands of tweets and thousands of fucking hours of discourse, it really fucking gets gross. This is why I'm looking at what you were saying, Lizzie, and going, what the fuck are you on about? I love you, girl, but what the fuck are you on about? Even if I haven't seen the movie, the synopses I've read essentially prove her point. They seem like similar story structures. That's not a problem, and if you like that type of thing, it makes sense. Corporations in fucking Hollywood have been trying to make more kid stuff around Avatar because it was basically lightning in a bottle. Fuck, what was it called? The Dragon Prince was Avatar-centric as fuck, and that had no Asian aesthetics in it, but it sure the fuck felt like Avatar. So why is it if I make a substantive argument saying the same thing about, like, the Dragon Prince, but if we talk about Rhea, it's suddenly racist? That doesn't make any sense. And to me, it rings as just wanting to lash out. If you look through the various tweets here, the reality of the situation is people just want to dunk. Like here, this gentleman, I posted his stuff before because I think this is actually good. Lindsay Ellis explained that she didn't mean the cultural similarities, but the story structure, yet admitted that it was careless and that she should have been more careful. Yet y'all want to drag her. You're acting like a blind mob. Like, here we go. Okay, this was fun to wake up to. Probably going to delete the original tweet, even though it's going into screen cap town. But I'd rather them have fun with screen caps than quote tweets. So I'll just say this. I wasn't referencing the similar setting of Rhea and Avatar, to be clear. Rhea, more than anything, reminded me of a few YA fantasies from the last few years, namely Children of Blood and Bone and Blood Heir, not familiar with either of those, which are not only not based on Asian folklore, Nigerian and Russia/Chinese respectively, but the authors were openly inspired by The Last Airbender. So I'm gonna challenge people on this. Lizzie, you said that this was racist, but this is literally her explaining her intention. You can disagree with that critique, but I think calling this racist is incredibly disingenuous. Now, I'm not going to scream at chat like Vosh does or shit like that, but I do get really upset with this because, again, we're supposed to be better than this. I'm not trying to shame anybody, but for fuck's sakes. What is this? Here's her father response. And considering we basically have an entire generation of American writers who were heavily influenced by The Last Airbender, my thoughts was, this is a trend, wondering if there will be a name for this. I wasn't thinking about a specific inspo for The Last Airbender and Rhea, and that was careless. I can see where if you squint, I was implying all Asian-inspired properties are the same, especially if you were already privy to those conversations where I had not seen them. But the basic framework of The Last Airbender is becoming popular in fantasy fiction outside of Asian-inspired stuff. You may not agree or whatnot with that. I don't read YA fiction. I can barely pick up a book most days. ADHD is a bitch. But to say this is coming from a racist place, I just don't think that's true. I just don't. And the fact is that I'm not trying to, like, disclude anyone's opinions or anyone's views, but I think this is really fucking reckless. Not because she posted something that could be squinted at and looked at as racist. Yeah, she made a tiny mistake there. But the amount of retweets, the amount of lashing out is so incredibly inappropriate. Any person on there that calls themselves a leftist is a fucking idiot. Because rather than try to work with this person and give her the benefit of the doubt and ignore her entire biography, they just lashed out. And this is where I'm going to differ from some other internet pundits on this. I think Lindsay Ellis was 100% justified in deleting or deactivating her Twitter. The reason I say this is very simple. I look at this as a person who was making a simple critique and pointing out a trend in YA fiction and was jumped on by every single person on the internet looking to feed a grudge. And to me, the indulgence of this is incredibly inappropriate. This is no different than how bad it got for ContraPoints. Even if you have decent critiques about some of the things ContraPoints has done, and I'm willing to hear those, right? But when it's just hateful lashing out, there's no point. No, Psychic, you're absolutely fucking right. At the end of the day, nothing was gained or helped in this process. You just damaged a woman's psychology for no damn reason. I'm going to be really clear. If you want to be a part of my community as we build that, the community that me and Zena want to build, and you think that Lindsay Ellis being treated this way was appropriate, please fuck off. We don't want you. Because the reality of the situation is that the only way that we bring people along to understand these concepts and want people to be better is we have to take a risk and give them a chance. This is the same thing with the reformed Nazi girl. I'm not going to say the shit she did before was just suddenly made okay. It's not. But the fact is, she's now like a fucking non-binary person in like a lesbian relationship, and this person's like a huge fan of Vosh and other leftists. Like, you can talk about those leftists and say what the fuck's their issue, but like, this person's actively trying to do better, but people just want to lash out and say, oh, I feel unsafe, I feel this. I don't think this is appropriate. I don't think this is a way to behave in the world. This isn't like attacking Tim Pool or Steven Crowder or Ben Shapiro. Why do we attack these people? It's like we're waiting for them to fall because we're used to being disappointed so fucking much. I just don't understand the purpose of psychologically attacking someone to this degree. And then to say that her deleting her account is cowardice, it's not. She flat out says what she did was careless, so she demonstrates knowledge of where the mistake was, and then still got fucking ratioed. The idea that this was deserved, or that this should have gone anywhere this far, does not in any way, shape, or form help make people more aware of what they're saying. It does not make people more aware in general. What it does is it makes people like me and other creators terribly afraid that they're going to make a misstep and be fucking canceled. The fact is, this is a 2 hours old tweet, and it's already got 56 fucking replies, not to mention all the replies to those. This is the stuff that makes me concerned about having this channel. Because I'm not as strong as some creators. I'm a fairly fucking weak person. I don't like conflict. I'll get into it. I think conflict can be incredibly healthy, but I don't like it in the sense that I don't want to be fighting with anyone. I want to get along with people. I want to find a way to make things work. Obviously not with fucking Nazis. I talk shit about them all the time because they've gone past that moral event horizon. And in some cases, as long as they keep doing the behavior they're doing, they can never come back. But I'm not going to get rid of the notion that people can't be rehabilitated and brought over, because the problem is that we need to do that. We need to bring people to our way of thinking. This did nothing. Psychic refugee is 100% fucking correct. This did nothing. And the idea that this was appropriate is insanity. I know other people have said that deleting the channel, or the Twitter account and all that was cowardice. I've seen other people say that it's not the right way to do it because people will just further dog on you, which is exactly what happened. I'm going to come down against this really hard, and this is why. My belief is simply this. I do not want to see the content creators that I like and enjoy be so damaged that they stop making content and stop trying to do good in the world. I don't want to see the people who were the ones that essentially took back YouTube from the alt-right to be bashed into the ground until they're damaged beyond repair. I'm a fucking therapist. I'm also a leftist. I'm also a person that fucking cares. This is not okay. And even if you think what she said could be considered racist, what happened was not okay. This isn't like a dyed-in-the-wool KKK member. This isn't somebody who's actively doing fucking, like, Klan rallies. Like, really, like, what the fuck, guys? Like, this is not a thing. So I'm sorry to pick on you, Lizzie. I appreciate you speaking up even though you had a different opinion. I don't want you to feel like I'm picking on you. I just want to be very clear that I disagree with you emphatically as to your interpretation of this. I think there's some really good reads on this because, again, I'm not familiar with the second movie. But if you go on r/Lindsay Ellis on Reddit, r/Vosh has a couple good things. I've seen some decent commentary about why people are really upset that this happened. And again, I'll argue that I would make the same claim about the Dragon Prince. Me and Zena literally talked about it being Avatar-like. Fuck, Voltron. The DreamWorks Voltron? Like, until the last 2 seasons, it's still kind of Avatar-esque. Then it got dark, but, well, you know, whatever. And then it did the kill your gaze trope. Like, let me be really clear about something here. Give me 1 second. I want to show this to you guys because I think it's really important. So, we'll talk more about this in a minute, but I've actually had interactions on here with different content creators who actively, like, blocked me because of my take on this. And it's kind of toxic. We'll talk about that more in a minute. But here's the thing. It's okay to not like what she said. It's also okay to disagree with her interpretation. That's okay. I want you guys to be able to do that. I want you to have that common sense abilities. Critical thinking is important. It's something I struggle with because of my ADHD, but, you know, go off. But here's the point, and this is what I really want to make 100% abundantly clear. We can't keep treating people like this. We just can't. And, like, I think it really means a lot if there are different left-leaning communities that make a very, very concerted effort to smash this stuff when they see it. I am fine with critique. I have issues with it because of rejection sensitivity dysphoria, but I will take time away, I will work with my shit, and then I will come back and try to understand what the fuck you were saying. But we can't keep doing this to people. I just don't think this is okay. I just don't. So, hopefully we can improve this, and we can start pushing back on these people, because it's not okay. Alright? I love you guys, and I know this was a hard one, but appreciate you sticking through it. What's up, Kisses?
I'm probably a little bit late, but I was just going to say a couple of tidbits on this.
Yeah, feel free to add in.
the principles that we also kind of use in our house is, like, what we're dealing with, our response to something is, what was the material harm of the thing that was done? Right? Like, and respond accordingly to that. And, like, in this case, Lindsay Ellis' tweet, like, wasn't calling names. There was some confusion as what she meant. There wasn't, like, any slurs used, right? Like, there wasn't blatantly awful racist stuff here. And yet the treatment feels like that's what had happened. And I find this to be really disjointed. I think that's part of my issue with this, is that it's, especially when we say canceling, we don't just mean like one thing. The effect is, in fact, hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of people, depending, dogpiling someone, sending toxic messages with DMs, calling for all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, like,
right?
We're not talking
about one thing with canceling. You're not the only person showing up here. You're the 1,000 and 10,000th person in line for this person.
Well, and we'll get to this in a minute. I do want to bring this up more when I talk about this other thing that happened. But no, this is exactly right. Like, again, for all the stuff you saw on Twitter, you don't get to see all of the stuff behind the scenes. Like, Contra, when the canceling for Contra happened around the opulence video, she literally said she had been sexually assaulted, doxxed, stalked. Like, when we say that this type of behavior online is okay, we are giving certain unstable people carte blanche to do what they fucking want. I'm not a fan of that. So like, substantial critique, sure. But when we start trying to do this type of shit, I don't think it's great. Yeah. Thanks for jumping in there, Zena. When we put this into video form, I'll just clip it so it fades from one to the other, and we'll get rid of that scene progression. So
yeah, okay.
All right. So thanks, guys, for listening. I think that's all I've got on this one. Thank you, Zena, for speaking up. I appreciate it, love. And yeah, we'll see you in the next one.